In very exciting news, today I paid for a Diet Coke with a £5 note and then counted out my change simply by looking at it. Since I last made one of these, I've had the opportunity to visit some really interesting and beautiful places, such as Bath, probably known earliest as the home of the wife of Bath in the Canterbury Tales, but also the setting for Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey and Persuasion. Stonehenge, where the most exciting aspect for me was circling the stones and trying to decide on which fallen pillar Tess Durbeyfield would have lay on at the end of Thomas Hardy's novel. And Oxford, where, to be fair, I was most excited about seeing the sites at which the Hogwarts Infirmary and Great Hall were filmed, but has been the setting of so many novels that in his book, Flaubert's Parrot, Julian Barnes cheekily decrees that there should be a 20-year ban on novels set in Oxford and Cambridge. I want to return to Bath, though, where one of the first things we saw was the pump room, and I was filled with the surreal, electric feeling of standing on the ground where one of your favorite authors stood a little over 200 years ago. Here's what you should know about my love for Jane Austen. 1. It is completely unapologetic, and 2. It has nothing to do with the romance. Okay, well, it has something to do with the romance, of course, but certainly that is further down the list from all of the other virtues of Jane's novels. I think what's truly compelling about Austen is the wealth of life and detail she puts forth in her novels. Sir Walter Scott would say that she had a special touch which renders ordinary, commonplace things and characters interesting from the truth of their descriptions. And I would also agree with Victorian critic George Henry Lewes that her works are miniature instead of frescoes. She is working at the small scale of everyday life. The problem, or the exciting part, depending on how you think, is that there are infinite ways to read Jane's books. Take, for example, the first sentence of Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. It is easy to imagine that Jane wrote this with her tongue in her cheek, considering the ensuing ridiculous presentation of Mrs. Bennet and the criticism that is leveraged throughout the novel against her obsession with marrying off her daughters to rich men. However, we must remember that this universal truth does hold in the novel. Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley are single men in possession of good fortunes, and they are indeed both in want of wives. The work ends with 2 weddings, after all, and fulfills this maxim beautifully. It's difficult to parse, then, whether Jane was making fun of this universally acknowledged truth or not. And that's why Austen is the kind of puzzle you can spend ages discussing. We like to read her as punishing and scolding those attributes we detest. If you are vain, stupid, immoral, or obsessed with money, you are made fun of and end up unhappy, as demonstrated by Lydia, Miss Bingley, Mr. Wickham, Sir Walter Elliot, Elizabeth Elliot, Mary Crawford, Maria Price, so on and so forth. If you mistreat others for not being wealthy or not being in your club, social class, then Austen will make you out as a fool. But then you also have to consider Austen never says money is irrelevant. All of Austen's heroines do marry well, or at least not into destitution. Even Eleanor Dashwood, in all her modesty about wealth, must wait until she and Edward Ferrars can have a minimum living. Anne Elliot cannot have her happy ending with Captain Wentworth until he has made his fortune. And other characters like Charlotte Lucas marry men like Mr. Collins because, well, they need to be provided for. It's also not easy to swallow the ways in which wealth and worth are sometimes conflated in the novels. Mr. Darcy, Mr. Knightley, and Colonel Brandon are all the worthy and wealthy heroes of their tales. This isn't to say that Austen doesn't like to show us the ugly sides of the landed aristocracy as well, or show how status and wealth goes to people's heads, but she does take a value in this. Jane was, in fact, very concerned with society's rules and boundaries. She's not the kind of novelist that will make you feel great about your excessive emotions and sense of individuality, actually. Marianne Dashwood's tale is a beautiful condemnation of the tragic romantic heroine trope, and she doesn't die when her first love screws her over, and she finds happiness in her family and learns to love again. However, in order for this to happen, she must learn not to be too sensitive and temper her dramatic behavior. In Mansfield Park, timid and conservative Fanny Price is shown to be the most worthy of all the characters, especially when compared to the saucy Mary Crawford. The characters that are the least commendable in the novels are those who cannot learn from their shame. Lydia, for example, will not allow society to reprimand her. Lizzie, however, feels all too sharply the pain of her embarrassing family and her own behavior. Like Marianne, she learns, she tempers. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder about the values of conforming to customs or following society's rules. By which rules should we live our lives? That is the true magic behind Austen's novels, I think. They are novels of manners that make us truly think about our actions. As Professor Claudia Johnson concluded in our lectures last fall, the biggest lessons we learn from Jane Austen are how to take everyday challenges seriously as occasions to be true, kind, and courteous. These are the kind of things that elevate daily life to the level of great novels and inspire readers like me to travel to the places where they all went down.